tell me if this is a stupid question. You know.
He
came and asked me.
He did?
That's what I told you. There's different structure this. I said, that structure this way. Those are my questions.
Because I heard him talking. So he basically used the word disassociate.
Did he?
Yeah.
He used it.
I talked to him. Facebook guy. He was like, what is he doing? That's good. He's like, yeah. Strike the right time. Skeptic. But I just prompted the joke with him. He'll laugh. So it's like a good if you want to see it.
Actually, this right here could be the beginning of social network too.
Exactly. Just make sure they cast me. Let
me picture cast me. I've been calling Chubby Tom Cruise.
That's been like, it's kind of like a stick. Friendly, funny, but then like it's a great actor. Especially that side. Curious, skeptic, cautious, but again, innovation, not sure what we're
So Gleba obviously something so I'm going to take a different direction than BSA. And it's this. Is it possible to track? So you have items of right? There's a couple things I want to ask. You know, number one, governance and structure, right? Policy can add a lot of money to the technical development of anything. Right. Done. Right? When you're looking at multiple countries, how many countries are there? Let's say it's a few. There's 193 when I look at the top of the stream.
That tells you how much the world is.
So 95 countries. Anybody not running machine? If somebody was emissions, right? Right? If somebody wanted a rule set based on the structural policies and governance literally emissions, operating already catch-ups and can we do a transactional look based on the movement of that transaction or to say that there's an AML BSA file forward that this token looks like it's being used nefariously.
You can tie that to beneficial ownership. Like we just passed a bill, just the house is that's basically what they're trying to get at. That's what I think y'all are looking at.
Do you like that?
Yes, yes I do.
Is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. Thanks so much for being here today, too. And I also want to thank the chairwoman for having this hearing. You said a lot of things today that I don't think could have been said in the last hearing. So it was important to have you here, and your responses to questions has been very direct and very helpful. So thank you for that, and thank you very much for being here. I just had a few quick questions about the Libra Association. On the website, one of the benefits before Mr. Marcus appeared before our committee was that those contributing who joined the association could derive dividends from Libra investment tokens, and that's since been taken off. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure, Congressman. I think that there had been an idea that in order to encourage marketing of the payment service, that there might be some investment that other companies could make into this and some return that they could make. But I think that that idea has either morphed or been abandoned at this point. I'm not sure exactly what the current state of it is, but that's what you're referring to.
Yes, that is. Do you think that's a reason some of these bigger name players pulled out of the association? Or do you have a theory on that?
Congressman, I don't think that that's related to that, would be my guess. I mean, those companies could have invested if they wanted to under that program, but I'm not sure that they were planning to.
And so I kind of want to close on this line of Switzerland. I traveled with the chairwoman to Switzerland, and we found an environment there that seemed to be very pro bringing the association to Switzerland. And one of the things that was troubling to me was this idea that we've got a great American company like Facebook and a great American success story like yourself, who's pushing this idea on foreign soil. In your written testimony, one of the things you said is, I believe this will extend America's financial leadership, as well as our democratic values and oversight around the world. If America doesn't innovate, our financial leadership is not guaranteed. Those are your words, and I agree with you. But why not bring this to the United States? Even if it means saying, we tried this, we couldn't get our fellow Americans, we couldn't get Congress on board, but we think we'll have more success here at home. Why not give that a shot?
Well, Congressman, our subsidiary, Calibra, as well as a lot of the other organizations, are American. A lot of the work that we're doing is happening in America. The platforms that we're building, like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, where people might be able to use Libra if the project moves forward, those are American products that carry our values, and it's contemplated that the reserve of the Independent Libra Association would be primarily American dollars. So we've talked at length today about some of the reasons why it might make sense to headquarter an international association in the place that a lot of other international associations are headquartered, but I wouldn't take away from that this isn't still going to be an American innovation that is extending America's financial leadership around the world.
So I'll just say this, before this hearing, I kind of had two issues. One was some of the issues Facebook has had over the last few years. A lot of them have been voiced in this hearing today. And the other was the whole issue of moving this to Switzerland. And I just would say that I think you've done a good job answering our questions today. Any company as large as yours is going to have problems, and you'll continue to have problems. And so I'm not so much against the idea of Facebook pursuing an innovative idea like perhaps I was in the past, but it's difficult for me to get on board with something that's so big being in another country, and I would implore you to consider bringing this home perhaps as things move forward. You've said that you'll pull out of the association if it goes a direction you don't want to go. I would argue that you have enough influence to bring this home and keep this American, and I would ask that you consider that, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Iowa, Ms. Axney, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you for being here, Mr. Zuckerberg. I asked my constituents what they would like to ask you, and Chairwoman, I'd like to enter those into the record.
Without objection, such is the order.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about privacy in a second, but I want to start by reminding everybody here of Facebook's mission. It says your mission is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. If your goal is to bring the world closer together, I believe that requires you taking your responsibility for our elections very seriously. I know yesterday you revealed new attacks from Russia and Iran, many of them targeting swing states. And I take those very personally because those are my constituents, and I would like you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about the people who are being targeted. I don't want to spend too long on this, but Facebook's size makes it a target for those kinds of attacks. And if Facebook is going to remain essential to how Americans communicate, I need you to work harder to prevent these kinds of attacks. But moving on, let's start with a couple of basics. How many American adults have a Facebook account?
Congresswoman, I don't know the exact breakdown off the top of my head. I can get back to you on that.
I believe U.S. and Canada combined is about 240 million, or 85% of the adults. And the second question would be, I know substantially all of Facebook's $55 billion in revenue last year came from advertising. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, the vast majority comes from advertising. That's right.
Okay, so 50 billion at least, do you think, comes from advertising?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe this year you said you want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to, control their data privacy. I believe you said this last year, that you're going to make sure that folks have that opportunity even when they're not logged into Facebook. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but in general, yes. I think people should have control over all of their information. In all forms.
So do you collect data on people who don't even have an account with Facebook?
Congresswoman, there are a number of cases where a website or app might send us signals from things that they're seeing, and we might match that to someone who's on our services, but someone might also send us information about someone who's not on our services, in which case we likely wouldn't use that.
So you collect data on people who don't even have an account, correct?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure that's what I just said.
If you're loading up somebody's contacts and you're able to access that information, that's information about somebody who might not have a Facebook account. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, if you're referring to a person uploading their own contact list and saying that the information on their contact list might include people who are not on Facebook, then sure, yes. Okay. In that case,
so Facebook then has a profile of virtually every American, and your business model is to sell ads based on harvesting as much data as possible from as many people as possible. So you said last year that you believed it was a reasonable principle that consumers should be able to easily place limits on the personal data that companies collect and retain. I know Facebook users have a setting to opt out of data collection and that they can download their information. But I want to remind you of what you said in your testimony. Facebook is about putting power in people's hands. If one of my constituents doesn't have a Facebook account, how are they supposed to place limits on what information your company has about them when they collect information about them, but they don't have the opportunity to opt out because they're not in Facebook?
Congresswoman, respectfully, I think I don't agree with the characterization saying that if someone uploads their contacts.
That's just one example. I know that there's multiple ways that you're able to collect data for individuals. So I'm asking you, for those folks who don't have a Facebook account, what are you doing to help them place limits on the information that your company has about them?
Congresswoman, my understanding is not that we build profiles for people who are not on our service. There may be signals that apps and other things send to us that might include people who aren't in our community, but I don't think we include those in any kind of understanding of who a person is if the person isn't on our services.
So I appreciate that. What actions do you know specifically are being taken, or are you willing to take to ensure that people who don't have a Facebook account have that power to limit the data that your company is collecting?
Congresswoman, what I'm trying to communicate is that I believe that that's the case today. I can get back to you on all of the different things that we do in terms of controls and services.
That would be great, because we absolutely need some specifics around that to make sure that people can protect their data privacy. Mr. Zuckerberg, to conclude, Facebook is now tracking people's behavior in numerous ways, whether they're using it or not. It's been used to undermine our elections. And of course, I know you're aware Facebook isn't the most trusted name. So I'm asking you to think about what needs to be fixed before you bring a currency to market. Thank you.
The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Rickleman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for appearing today. It seems as though Facebook is somewhat of a regular fixture at the committee these days. So, Mr. Zuckerberg, my first question is simple but very thought-provoking. How realistic a betrayal was the social network? So, by the way, and the reason I asked that question, I think we're getting to the beginning of Social Network 2, and I just want to be in charge of my own casting. I want that on the record right now, so as we go forward. But I think your life story is impressive. I think ingenuity and hard work, I think you can aspire to a dream and have the American dream. However, I was part of the R&D infrastructure at the Office of Secretary of Defense. I had to do a lot of rapid reaction or quick reaction capability development, so I know the difficulty of trying to do something like this, especially in an agile process like you're doing. So I have some real questions. You know, when I was in the DoD, they played this thing called Stump the Dummy for me when I was trying to give a technical briefing. I will not do that today, I promise you that. So I'm going to ask some real questions here. The first thing, you talked about the many countries. I think, and I got a question, and thanks, I looked it up, you know, the power of Google, 170 million or so U.S. users, 2.32 billion worldwide for Facebook. My first question is, if this happens, and I know the Calibra is sort of an instantiation of Facebook and a wallet to hold an independent currency like Libra, right, is how I understand it. If you're in all these separate countries, and this is a technical question, do you believe it's possible to build a rule set or an algorithmic rule set, some kind of rule-based algorithm-based machine learning thing where you can comport or have the AML, BSA, the Anti-Money Laundering or Bank Security Acts of each country sort of rolled into the algorithm when you buy Libra in that specific geographic entity or from that portion. So I was wondering if that's something that is possible, that those rule sets could be built in automatically when you're actually logging in or building your Libra account through Calibra or through a wallet that might not be Calibra.
Congressman, I think this is a good question. We're certainly looking at whether there are elements of the AML or KYC regulations that can be encoded at the network level and not just at the level of the individual wallets or payment companies involved. In terms of how this works in different countries around the world, what we find is that the American standard and regulations tend to be pretty strict, and that if we can build similar tools for verifying people's government IDs across the world in different places, and you can make a centralized investment in that and then have it apply in a number of places. And I think that if we comply with America's laws on this, then we will largely be in compliance with most of what needs to happen around the world. There may be some specific things that need to be done differently in some places, but I think the technical complexity would probably be relatively similar.
And because I got the idea, we have usually prepared questions, but so now I'm just riffing right now because you talked about the renminbi, right? Digitizing the renminbi, and we talked a little bit about the digital dollar. So my question is this: when it comes to sort of anti-money laundering or illicit trafficking, my background was in follow the money. Do you believe, and this is a technical question, not a how far we can go into this. Do you believe it's possible on the AML side that you can tag the attributes of the transaction on those attributes rather than the entity itself to see if there's any nefarious activity with that specific token? In other words, by not going into the privacy portions of this, can we actually track what's happening with that token? And at that point, maybe look at if that token is doing something wrong without sort of identifying what the user is or the owner of Libra is for that transaction.
Congressman, I think we likely will explore security measures like that, just to analogize to another area of our work in kind of preventing nation states from trying to interfere in the democratic process. That type of thing of just looking at patterns of activity that kind of clusters of accounts are making, so we can build these AI systems that can find amongst the billions of people who are using our services when a group isn't behaving in the way that a human would. And then we can pass that along to the FBI or the relevant law enforcement to help figure out what the right action to take is. That's certainly been one of the effective enforcement measures that you would be able to take. So I would imagine that we will explore that here as well.
So possible to tag maybe a portion of the attributes or the transaction attributes rather than the people that actually bought the Libra currency token itself, or there's basket of currencies. And that's, I have 15 seconds left. So next week we'll be talking about IP geolocation. But no, I really, I'm excited about seeing how this goes along, but we are concerned based on, AML, right, and BSA, and where you're going to go with this. But I thank you. And by the way, I just want to end with Tom Cruise. He will be playing me in Social Network too. I yield my time.
The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Caston, is recognized for 5 minutes.
It's always a privilege to follow you, Mr. Cruz. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. I understand about a month ago you had a meeting in the Oval Office with the President and several senators from both parties. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was there a note taker present at that meeting?
Congressman, I don't think that there were note takers at any of these meetings.
Okay, so you're not aware that there's any record of what was discussed at that meeting?
Congressman, I'm not aware of any formal record.
Okay. Did you or did the President at that meeting raise or discuss the antitrust investigations that are underway, Department of Justice, Federal Trade Commission, or the various states' Attorney General?
Congressman, I don't think so, but the meeting was private overall.
I understand there was no record. I'm asking whether the subject came up.
Congressman, those subjects didn't come up, but in general, I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to comment in too much detail on private conversations.
We're in a public office. Did anyone discuss the policy change allowing the exemption of political figures and parties from misinformation, that prohibition on Facebook in the course of the meeting?
Congressman, no, that did not come up.
I want to dive into that in a little bit more detail, not in the context of your meeting. If I understand your testimony here today, you have an aggressive posture against essentially allowing free speech but blocking the speaker. So, for example, if Jenny McCarthy were to post something saying, "Don't get your kids vaccinated," would you take that down?
Congressman, I think we probably would not take that down, but it's hard for me to comment on a hypothetical without looking at the actual post and the plan and looking at all the.
So if someone with a large platform who is spreading misinformation on your platform, you're saying you wouldn't take it down, or you would? I thought you had earlier said that you would. It was only politicians you'd limit that speech for.
Congressman, in general, our policy is not to ban people from posting things that are false. It is to, you can say something on your page if you want. If an independent fact checker marks it as false, we will put a label on it that says that an independent fact checker has marked it as false, and we will reduce the distribution and spread of it through the network.
So let me follow on my colleague Ms. Tlaib's comment. You said that you were trying to police and block hate crimes and hate speech. If somebody, remember the American Nazi Party posted horrible anti-Semitic messaging on Facebook, would you block that?
Congressman, our policies against hate speech do lead to us taking down content completely. Misinformation.
Okay, so now let me follow. In the last election, Art Jones ran against Dan Lipinski in Illinois, neighboring district to mine. He was a member of the American Nazi Party. Would he be allowed to speak on your platform in a different fashion than a member of the Nazi Party who was not running for elected office?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with who this person is.
I'm asking the question whether you can spread hate speech if you are an elected official or trying to be an elected official, that you would not be allowed to if you were not in that capacity.
Congressman, I think that depends on a bunch of specifics that I'm not familiar with this case and can't answer to.
That's rather shocking.
I can follow.
I don't think that's a hard question, but fair enough. Look, it strikes me. Let me just ask you some totally hypothetical questions. You don't have to answer any of these, and frankly, I don't think you want to answer any of them. Whether or not the First Amendment allows you to scream fire in a crowded theater is an open question that we struggle with all, and how you define that. Whether or not the Libra is a bank or a credit card or a credit rating system and what regulatory environment it sits under is a hard question. You have the luxury and the privilege not to have to ask those questions and not to have to answer those questions. None of us on this side of the dais have that luxury. We have to figure that out. We have to sort that through. And you're a smart guy. You're a well-meaning guy. I have tremendous admiration for what you've built. But I would remind you of the wisdom of one of our great Supreme Court justices, Louis Brandeis, who said, the greatest dangers to liberty lurk in insidious encroachment by men of zeal, well-meaning, but without understanding. Justice Brandeis, of course, also described, one of my colleagues likes to ask everybody if they're a capitalist or a socialist. Justice Brandeis pointed out that when we have tremendous concentrations of power in our country, we only have three choices. We can allow that concentration of power to take over government, which is to embrace fascism. We can allow government to take over that concentration of power, which is to embrace communism, or we can embrace competition. Your luxury, sir, your privilege comes from the fact that as a country, those of us on this side of the dais have always chosen door three. And I hope you have the wisdom to appreciate that. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here and staying here throughout this entire process. Since I have the opportunity to help close out this hearing, I think I can safely say that this is at least the second time you've testified before Congress where members end up looking like they have invested absolutely no time learning about new technologies in order to responsibly question tech companies. I think that's a fair takeaway from this hearing. Congress is nowhere close to catching up with some of the most basic changes happening in our society. Now, I'd like to thank the Republican leader of the Financial Services Committee for the recent opportunity to serve as the ranking member of the Financial Technology Task Force. In this new role, I look forward to working with my colleague, Representative Lynch, to foster a competitive environment in which American innovation can flourish. This includes cryptocurrency, blockchain networks, and every area of fintech. Mr. Zuckerberg, I have serious concerns about the structure of Libra and its establishment outside the U.S. I also think it's incredibly important to distinguish Libra from cryptocurrency and truly decentralized open public networks. But what I'm most concerned about is Congress and American regulators. Unfortunately, my colleagues have offered several proposals in conjunction with this hearing that could have a tremendously harmful impact on innovation in the United States. A few of these provisions appear to apply securities regulation beyond actual securities. As co-chair of the Blockchain Caucus, I frequently meet with entrepreneurs who try to follow the rules and never receive a clear answer from regulators that what they're doing is legal. It has not been clear whether innovators who play by the rules of the road will ever receive the assurances that the U.S. government will not come after them. Clarity is incredibly necessary in securities law. We can support open public networks, and we can do so in a nonpartisan fashion. That's why I intend to introduce a bill that will make it clear that as long as you register as a security or comply with an exemption under existing law, you will not continue to have prosecution from a regulator hang over your head when that asset is publicly distributed and, in fact, a commodity. As lawmakers, it's our responsibility to explore all aspects of a platform like Libra that has the potential to impact so many and determine what, if any, laws should be passed to protect consumers while enabling businesses and the American economy to grow. If we don't lead in this area, others most certainly will. I'm encouraged by new opportunities to address this issue and approach these types of innovations with a curious and open mind. It presents an exciting opportunity for commerce and remittances here in the United States and globally. We all understand that any new innovation presents risks. The Financial Stability Board just last week issued a detailed report of the various risks that should be considered when we look at something like Libra, the Libra platform that can be viewed as what is called a global stablecoin or a potential global method of payment. These are serious risks that we as lawmakers and as a committee need to work through. But let me repeat that. We need to work through them. We should look at these issues, these opportunities, and these risks intelligently with input from experts in each of these areas. But what we should not do is immediately assume we need to ban them. The legislation identified for discussion during today's hearing would do just that. In your testimony, you present serious concerns with China's actions. I share this concern, but it should not come at the cost of even one single right of Americans, especially freedom of speech, assembly, and the right to due process. We can compete and excel beyond China, not despite our freedoms, but because of them. Mr. Zuckerberg, apart from private closed-door meetings and being called to testify, what has Facebook done to engage the entire crypto community to help Congress and regulators understand all the innovations in this space and why it should be supported domestically?
Thank you, Congressman. You're raising a number of important questions in here. This is part of the reason why we're organizing, why we helped start the Independent Libra Association. Right? This is clearly an area where it can't just be one company operating by itself and trying to stand up a system like this. And a number of the other companies and organizations that are part of the Libra Association are companies that have been involved in the crypto community and building great crypto companies and products for many years before we got into the space. So I think that some of them have come up here and talked to all of you about the work that they're doing, given a diverse opinion on, I'm representing my views on how I think that this can advance our economy and help to help lead to more financial inclusion and build good services for people. But I think over time we'll want more members of the Libra Association or whether we want them to or not, I think that they will be involved in helping to educate more folks as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I look forward to continuing the discussion.
The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've always maintained that those closest to the pain should be closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making. Now, one thing is abundantly clear to me, Mr. Zuckerberg, you are very close to the power. That power is only growing. Although there is disagreement about who really created Facebook, you ultimately secured near unilateral control of the company. In fact, because of your control of 90% of Class B shares, even if all other shareholders were to vote the same way, any proposal you don't support would still fail. All of that to say, Mr. Zuckerberg, Libra is Facebook, and Facebook is you. I know you understand the technological and business case for Libra. You have the stats, but I'm not certain you know the stories, that you understand the source of the pain that millions are experiencing, that are experiencing underbanking and credit invisibility. So, Mr. Zuckerberg, yes or no, in your adult life, have you ever been underbanked? Yes or no?
I'm going to go with no.
When I asked the head of Calibra about why people lacked bank accounts, he said he believed that, quote unquote, identity is a big problem, end quote. Yes or no? Do you agree that authentication is the major hurdle to accessing the financial system?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure. I think it's probably different in different places around the world.
The same World Bank report cited in your Libra white paper finds that almost 2/3 of 1.7 billion people who don't have bank accounts say it's because they lack enough money to open one. So this is not about authentication. This is not about banking costs. This is about a tsunami of hurt that millions are experiencing because of a $1.6 trillion student debt crisis, because of rising healthcare costs and people having to use GoFundMe pages to pay medical bills. This is because of the racial and gender wealth gap. So again, you represent the power, but I don't think you understand the pain. There's underbanking because people are broke. And so let me just ask you this question. Yes or no, is it free to use the Calibra wallet?
Congresswoman, the Calibra wallet isn't a service that is available today. Assuming we were able to launch it, it will be free.
So there is no fee?
Congresswoman, that's the goal, is to make it so that...
so there is no fee?
Congresswoman, the goal is to make it...
Okay, moving on. So if it costs money to buy Libra and costs money to use the Calibra wallet, I fail to see how this helps people with virtually no money. You are attempting to use technology to solve what is inherently an issue of wealth. At the end of the day, you are a business. So what is in the business interest for you here? And do you believe in what you are building? Do you believe in what you are building?
Congresswoman, yes.
So yes or no, would you leave behind your children's inheritance in Libra?
Congresswoman.
Do you believe in what you're building?
Yes, I do. And
would you leave behind your children's inheritance in Libra? I think it's a fair question because
I think it's
you've proven that we cannot trust you with our emails, with our phone numbers. So why should we trust you with our hard-earned money?
Well, Congresswoman...
Reclaiming my time. If you can't answer yes or no, would you leave behind your children's inheritance in Libra?
Congresswoman, I would, because it'll be backed one-to-one by others.
All right, moving on. I'm running out of time here. Mr. Zuckerberg, your recent speech at Georgetown touched upon how you were affected by the start of the Iraq War when you were in college, and how, quote, if more people had a voice to share their experiences, maybe things would have gone differently. Earlier this year, you announced that Jennifer Newstead would join Facebook as general counsel. Ms. Newstead was the chief deputy in the Office of Legal Policy at the Department of Justice. And in the fall of 2001, it was the day-to-day manager of the Patriot Act in Congress, according to John Yoo, author of the torture memos. Ms. Newstead helped sell Congress on mass surveillance once already, and now she is advising you how to do it again. So yes or no, is the Patriot Act reflective of your views on privacy and free speech?
Congresswoman.
10 seconds left. It's an easy, straightforward question. Is the Patriot Act reflective of your views on privacy and free speech?
Congresswoman, there's a lot in there. No, I do not agree with all of it.
Mr. Zuckerberg, that is not what your hiring choices indicate. And Maya Angelou told us a long time ago, when people reveal to you who they are, believe them. I yield.
The gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Hollingsworth, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Zuckerberg. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate your thoughtful answers to many of the questions that have been posed and the effort that you've undertaken. I actually do think you are really sympathetic to a lot of the plights around the world, including access to the financial system and some of the transaction costs associated with remitting money to individuals who may be far-flung around the world. And I actually really do think that you care a lot about that. And I think your zeal and passion for mobilizing, harnessing technology to deliver better outcomes for a vast number of people is truly inspirational, and I appreciate the effort that you and many other people at Facebook and other technologies undertake every single day to empower people to live better lives. And so I wanted to ask, in concert with that, I assume you and the others with you and with Facebook and the Libra Association have made conscientious choices about how the architecture of the technology to reflect what you're trying to do and lower those transaction costs and help intermediation across financial services. I wonder if you might talk about the technology a little bit and talk about the choices that you've made and how that reflects your genuine desire for this to be a tool of empowerment, a tool of connection, not an investment or a security or something like that. So I wonder if you might talk about that for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. You're right that I think that there's an opportunity to build a new financial infrastructure, maybe not completely from the ground up, but rebuild a lot of the cruft that has been take out a lot of the cruft that's been built up over the years. Right. Having something
not that that's bad necessarily, what existed today, but it arose in an environment far different than what we have today.
That's right. I agree with that. And I mean, and this is the way that all systems work. I mean, you build something up, and then more requirements get placed on it over time. You build more things.
Right. And technology advances enables us to jump over that, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
So I just think that we're in a different state of technology today, where some of the advancements in blockchain and some of the things that can be done decentralized, and in some cases the combination of decentralized and centralized systems, which we're able to try to help facilitate here with Calibra and as part of the Libra Association. I think just allow a lot of the costs and inefficiency to be taken out of the system. I just think if you look at it today, you have your mobile phone, you have WhatsApp, right? You can text someone around the world. Right. It's end-to-end encrypted. It gets there in less than a second, a lot less than a second. Right. It's easy to use. I just don't see why you shouldn't be able to send money in the same way. It should be able to get there quickly. It shouldn't take days to get there, like current remittances do. Right. It should be free or extremely affordable. I mean, it may not be able to be completely free because we'll have to comply with a lot of these regulations, and that will require people and work. Right. But just like the cost of text messages used to be very high before there was competition in that space, I think that the cost of money transfers should come down dramatically too, and enabling that kind of competition and kind of a new way of thinking about the space is fundamentally what we're trying to go for.
And I think that's right, and at least what I've read about some of the choices that have been made in the architecture behind the technology, it reflects that desire, right? As you've articulated, pegged to a basket of currencies, to be stable, not to be volatile, right? It is not truly a decentralized technology. It requires a central purpose, right? And I think that you've kind of built that architecture so that you can empower these individuals. And I think, look, it's really easy to talk about perhaps some of the demons that have been unleashed by technology, and it's really easy to forget the amazing advancements that we've been able to make as people, as humans, because of this technology. And I want this to reach more people around the world. You already have a tremendous network with, 2.5 billion people connected to that network, right? The question is, what else can we connect to that network to make it not only more valuable for Facebook, not only more valuable for the association, but more valuable for each of those people, right? And to Ms. Presley's point, each of those people that have felt for a long time disempowered, feel like they operate in a separate global economy than perhaps the developed world. They operate in a separate financial services system than the developed world. I believe in what you were trying to do, and I also believe you at your word in saying that the goal is to comply, the goal is to get to the right outcome, the goal is to make a difference in people's lives. Facebook has already done that. And that it reflects some of society's ills is not necessarily Facebook's fault. And I think that we should reflect really carefully on ensuring we have the right crucible for developing this technology over time. And I appreciate the effort that you've undertaken with regard to that already. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Utah, Mr. McAdams, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Zuckerberg, in addition to my job as a member of Congress, I hold the title, like you, of Dad. I have 4 children, ages 8, 11, and 14-year-old twins. And keeping them safe, not just for them, but for the thousands of kids that live in my district, is what I want to talk to you about today. Because the role online social networks play in the lives of our teenagers certainly causes me much stress and keeps me up at night. It's questions such as, who are my kids talking to online? Are they being groomed or exposed to illicit content? What does the exposure to what they see online mean for their physical and mental health development and their well-being? And I'm sure these are questions and concerns that most parents have. So I want to discuss the role that Facebook and other online social networks can play in keeping our kids safe. And I echo the points made earlier by my Republican colleague, Ms. Wagner. So a few weeks ago, the New York Times published a deeply troubling article on child sexual exploitation. The Times reported that technology companies, including Facebook, reported a record 45 million online photos and videos of child sexual abuse content last year. And Facebook specifically was responsible for the vast majority of reports of online sexual abuse materials. And thank you for your efforts to crack down on that. But Facebook Messenger alone was responsible for 65% of the reports, with roughly 12 million out of 18.4 million worldwide reports. I know you're aware of that report. The report also noted that only halfway through the year, a specialized law enforcement team had conducted 150 raids across my state of Utah in response to internet crimes against children, and that they expect to arrest twice as many people this year compared to last year for crimes related to child sexual abuse material. So this is clearly a problem in Utah, a problem across our nation, and it isn't getting better, it's getting worse. So, Mr. Zuckerberg, yes or no, do you believe that online social media platforms such as Facebook have a role to play, even an obligation, to ensure that their platforms are safe for our vulnerable populations, especially our children?
Congressman, absolutely, and we do a lot of work on this. As you pointed out, I think the reason why the vast majority of
yeah, I saw your comments earlier to Ms. Wagner to that effect. Thank you.
To find this stuff.
And that's good to hear. So let's dig into the challenges on that and steps that Facebook is taking to ensure that our children remain protected. Mr. Zuckerberg, according to reports, WhatsApp has more average monthly users than Facebook Messenger, 1.6 billion to 1.3 billion respectively. But according to the New York Times report, Facebook Messenger reports roughly 65% of all sexual abuse reports, whereas, quote, the data shows that WhatsApp, the company's encrypted messaging app, submits only a small fraction of the reports that Messenger does, end quote. I'm curious as to why WhatsApp, your more popular messaging app, reports only a fraction of the incidents that Facebook Messenger does. Yes or no? Is it in part because WhatsApp is encrypted end-to-end, whereas Facebook Messenger is currently not?
Congressman, that's right. When the content is encrypted end-to-end, we can't actually see the content itself, so we have to do other measures to prevent connections between adults and minors.
That makes sense, thank you. So, Mr. Zuckerberg, earlier this year you announced plans to move your Messenger app in the direction of WhatsApp by encrypting all communications sent over that app end-to-end. And I know, of course, there's a delicate balance between privacy and child safety, but I don't think this is an either-or proposition. Facebook and other tech companies were founded with innovation at their core. I think we can have encryption and more secure messaging while still ensuring that we protect our children. That technology can play a role in keeping our children safe, even if the app is encrypted. I see great value in encryption technology and more secure data transmission, but I know that it comes with some risks. So I'm concerned about the move of Facebook Messenger to end-to-end encryption with the cryptocurrency rocket fuel. If we don't get it right, and the repercussions that it may have on our ability to stop predators who take advantage of our children. So, seeing that my time is short, Mr. Zuckerberg, while I know that you are using some of your technologies to detect and delete explicit content like AI, Facebook needs to be doing much more to protect our children. A move to encryption for Facebook Messenger will only proliferate the danger if not done correctly, all while giving you plausible deniability on what goes on your platform. You can and should prioritize child safety as you move forward with privacy safeguards. And I urge you to work with child safety experts before taking any steps that could put our children in danger. 45 million photos and videos last year of child sexual abuse material. We must do better. Our children deserve nothing less. Thank you.
The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
It's good to see you, Mr. Zuckerberg. I think you, of all people, can appreciate using a person's past behavior in order to determine, predict, or make decisions about future behavior. And in order for us to make decisions about Libra, I think we need to kind of dig into your past behavior and Facebook's past behavior with respect to our democracy. Mr. Zuckerberg, what year and month did you personally first become aware of Cambridge Analytica?
I'm not sure of the exact time, but it was probably around the time when it became public. I think it was around March of 2018. I could be wrong, though.
Mm-hmm. When did Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg become aware of Cambridge Analytica?
I don't know off the top of my head.
You don't know. Did anyone on your leadership team know about Cambridge Analytica prior to the initial report by The Guardian on December 11th, 2015?
Congresswoman, I believe so, and that some folks were tracking it internally.
And
I'm actually, as you're asking this, I do think I was aware of Cambridge Analytica as an entity earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was tracking how they were using Facebook specifically.
When was the issue discussed with your board member, Peter Thiel?
Congresswoman, I don't know that off the
You don't know. This was the largest data scandal with respect to your company that had catastrophic impacts on the 2016 election. You don't know?
Well, Congresswoman, I'm sure we discussed it after we were aware of what happened.
Okay. You announced recently that the official policy of Facebook now allows politicians to pay to spread disinformation in 2020 elections and in the future. So I just want to know how far I can push this in the next year. Under your policy, using census data as well, could I pay to target predominantly black zip codes and advertise them the incorrect election date?
No, Congresswoman, you couldn't. We have, even for these policies around the newsworthiness of content that politicians say and the general principle that I believe that...
But you said you're not going to fact check my ads.
We have, if anyone, including a politician, is saying things that that is calling for violence or could risk imminent physical harm or voter or census suppression when we roll out the census suppression policy, we will take that content down.
So you will, there is some threshold where you will fact check political advertisements. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, Congresswoman, yes, for specific things like that, where there's imminent risk of harm.
Could I run ads targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Would I be able to run advertisements on Facebook targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal? I mean, if you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds here. What's fair game?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think
so. You don't know if I'll be able to do that.
I think probably.
Do you see a potential problem here with a complete lack of fact-checking on political advertisements?
Well, Congresswoman, I think lying is bad, and I think if you were to run an ad that had a lie, that would be bad. That's different from it being, for in our position, the right thing to do to prevent your constituents or people in an election from seeing that you had lied.
So you won't take down lies, or you will take down lies? I think it's just a pretty simple yes or no.
Congresswoman,
I'm not talking about spin. I'm talking about actual
yes, in most cases, in a democracy, okay. I believe that people should be able to see for themselves what politicians that they may or may not vote for are saying.
So you won't take them
their
down.
Character for themselves.
So you won't take. You may flag that it's wrong, but you won't take it down.
Congresswoman, it depends on the context that it shows up. Organic post, ads. The treatment is a little bit different.
One more question. In your ongoing dinner parties with far-right figures, some of who advance the conspiracy theory that white supremacy is a hoax, did you discuss so-called social media bias against conservatives, and do you believe there is a bias?
Congresswoman, so I don't remember everything that was in the question.
That's all right. I'll move on. Can you explain why you've named the Daily Caller, a publication well-documented with ties to white supremacists, as an official fact-checker for Facebook?
Congresswoman, sure. We actually don't appoint the independent fact-checkers. They go through an independent organization called the Independent Fact-Checking Network that has a rigorous standard for who they allow to serve as a fact-checker.
So you would say that white supremacist-tied publications meet a rigorous standard for fact-checking? Thank you.
Congresswoman, I would say that we're not the one assessing that standard. The International Fact-Checking Network is the one who is setting that standard.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Virginia, Ms. Wexton, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for sticking around and answering all of our questions today. I know it's been a long day. Just so I'm clear on the difference between, Libra and Calibra. Now, Libra is a global coin or currency, or a global payment system, as you called it in your earlier testimony. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, that is correct.
And it's going to be tied to a basket of commodities or currencies, and it's going to be backed by assets of the members of the Libra Association. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, that is the current thinking, although as we've discussed in testimony today, there are other ways.
It's still a fluid thing. And it's going to be monitored and handled by the Libra Association, which is a not-for-profit entity, correct?
Congresswoman, the reserve for the Libra payment system will be handled by the Independent Libra Association. That is correct.
And that's a not-for-profit, right?
That is
You mentioned that several times in your testimony.
Yes.
Calibra is the digital wallet. It's where somebody's going to put their Libra, correct?
Yes, Congresswoman. Calibra
and that's a wholly owned subsidiary of Facebook, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and that Calibra is a for-profit entity, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess I'm just kind of a little bit curious about how you're going to make your money, what the business model is. Do you anticipate that you're going to collect fees from vendors, much like a credit card processor? Or are you going to mine data and use that to monetize the data that you get from people's purchases, or all of the above?
Congresswoman, we're not going to share payment information from Calibra to the rest of Facebook for personalizing services. So there are just a small number of limited cases where we might have to share data if for overall security,
so how are you going to make money?
Tax law requires it. Sorry?
So how are you going to make money?
The basic method here is through advertising overall. And the way that this is going to work
so you will still use that data for advertising purposes?
Congresswoman, no, sorry, if you'll give me a moment.
Actually, I'm going to reclaim my time because my time's about halfway up. A couple days ago, Facebook released its plan to protect the 2020 elections. I assume you're familiar with this document, right?
Congresswoman, I can't.
Helping to protect the 2020 U.S. elections.
Okay, yes.
Okay. And now, the plan doesn't mention deepfakes, but it does talk about misinformation. So I assume, would deepfakes fall under this umbrella of misinformation, according to your plan here?
Congresswoman, they could, and we're also working on a separate deepfakes policy as well.
Okay, yes, and I know you talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So do you understand there's a difference between misinformation and disinformation? Are you aware of that? That there's a difference between those two concepts? Misinformation is false information that is spread regardless of whether there is intent to mislead. Disinformation is deliberately misleading information, manipulated narrative, or propaganda. Are you aware that there's a difference between those two concepts?
Congresswoman, yes.
Okay. But do you believe it's not your position to get into what the intent of any kind of poster is in putting that information out there?
Congresswoman, it's not that it's not our responsibility or that it's not good to take that into account. It's just that it's much harder to determine intent at scale. I mean, I gave this example.
Okay, and so I have an example actually. So we all saw the manipulated video of Speaker Pelosi, right? That was posted on Facebook and reposted by a number of other folks. That was obviously digitally manipulated content. Now, did that came out before this policy started? So did it have a third-party independent review to determine whether it was manipulated or not?
Congresswoman, it did have a third-party fact-checking review.
And how long did that fact-checking review take?
I think I don't know how long the review took, but there was an operational mistake on our side which took too long for us to flag it for a fact checker to look at. So once we'd flagged it,
and then once the information came out that was an altered video and it was essentially a fake video, who made the decision to leave it up?
Well, Congresswoman, our policy is that for misinformation, we don't.
I understand that that's the policy, but was there a recommendation that the video be taken down at any point in that process?
Well, Congresswoman, the policy is fairly clear on how we should act with that.
Were you involved in making a decision about whether that video came down or whether it remained up?
Congresswoman, yes, and part of this was, okay, this is what our policy is now, and recognizing that this example, among others, highlighted for us that we need a separate deepfake policy that may be different from how we treat ordinary misinformation. And that's what we're working on now. We've started by implementing this deepfake challenge to work on technical solutions for identifying deepfakes and figuring out what they are, and that's how we're proceeding on this.
You had me at yes, Mr. Zuckerberg. Thanks.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Dean, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here before our committee. Mr. Zuckerberg, does Facebook do any business with Trump International Hotel here in Washington, D.C.?
Congresswoman, I do not know the answer to that.
There have been public reports of enterprises and even governments doing business with Trump hotels to curry favor with the administration. Do you think you could get us the answer to whether or not you have been doing any business, Facebook, your company, has been doing any business with the hotel?
Congresswoman, I will look into it with my team.
And you'll be able to get us data and information?
My team will follow up with you.
Is there any chance that Facebook actually books blocks of rooms at Trump International Hotel and does not use them?
Congresswoman, I would be very surprised to hear if that were the case.
Who in your company would be in charge of the people who would do such bookings?
Congresswoman, I'm not even sure because I would be very surprised if that were a thing that we would do. So I'm not sure what team would be in charge of a thing that I don't think we were doing.
But you don't know. You have no idea.
Congresswoman, I've certainly never heard of anything like that happening. I'll confirm it after this.
But you don't know if Facebook has booked, for any occasion, a room or a block of rooms at Trump International Hotel?
Congresswoman, what I'm saying is I'm not aware of that. It's hard for me to sit here and know all of the things that our organization hasn't done.
So to be clear, you don't have any knowledge of that?
That is correct.
Even though what you are proposing here, Libra, will most likely be regulated by Congress and by this Trump administration. Is that correct?
Congresswoman, that's correct.
And we do know that enterprises and even foreign governments have booked rooms at Trump Hotel, and there's a real concern about currying favor with the administration by doing business there. Do you worry about that too?
Congresswoman, I've seen the stories, and
Do you worry about that too?
I understand the concern, yes.
Do you share the concern?
Congresswoman, yes. If someone is trying to inappropriately curry favor, that's bad.
I look forward to your sharing that information with this committee. Let's move on to the role of trust. Federal Reserve Board Chairman Jerome Powell said, Libra faces many serious concerns regarding privacy, money laundering, consumer protection, and financial security. Trust. So before we move forward to Libra, why don't we look back on the issue of trust and you and Facebook? As you know, from 2009 till 2011, there were many complaints against Facebook, and in 2011, you, Facebook, agreed to settle with the FTC regarding deceptive practices, at least 8 counts of wrongdoing, breaches of privacy. In 2012, the FTC accepted a final settlement with you, Facebook, because Facebook said you could keep your customers' information private and that you would agree to accept or require their express consent before sharing information. Is that correct? That was your 2012 agreement?
Congresswoman, that sounds roughly correct.
That was a consent decree with the federal government. You think that's roughly correct?
That sounds roughly correct.
Did you live up to that?
Congresswoman, I think that that's up for our regulator to decide. I think we've certainly made...
Are you aware of your July settlement for a fine of $5 billion?
Of course.
You are aware?
Of course.
So over the course from 2009 until this very year, while under a consent decree to clean up your credibility with your customers, to protect their privacy, to protect them from deceptive practices, you failed to do that for 10 years, am I correct?
Congresswoman, I wouldn't agree with that characterization.
But you settled for $5 billion in recognition of that failure. I'll move on. Given your history, why should Congress, regulators, and the public trust you to create what amounts to the world's largest bank, what really amounts to a shadow sovereign government? Why would we want you to do that?
Well, Congresswoman, we're not creating a bank. We're helping an organization create a payment system. And I don't
payment
think that
system of shadow currency that really would operate more like a government. And I want to quote you. In a lot of ways, Facebook is more like a government than a traditional company. We have this large community of people, and more than other technology companies, we're really setting policies. More like a government, right? That's Facebook. I see I have very little time left. I'm going to end with an expression that my son taught me recently, that we earn credibility drop by drop, but we pour it away in buckets. I suggest, and my hope is that Facebook will go back to earning credibility drop by drop from those very customers you profit from. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. Today, my colleagues and I have asked a lot of questions about trust. You just heard one. Facebook is playing a game of catch-up to build user trust, especially among the African-American community in the United States. And according to a report produced for the Senate Intelligence Committee, the Russian influence campaign on social media in 2016 in that election made an extraordinary effort to target African Americans. They used an array of tactics to try to suppress turnout among Democratic voters and unleashed a blizzard of activity on Instagram, which you also own, that rivaled or exceeded its posts on Facebook. And so the report states that no single group of Americans was targeted by IRA information operatives more than African Americans. As a black woman who has fought my entire life against voter suppression efforts and tactics, I implore you to ensure your platform does not become a dark place for fringe elements to amplify hate, racism, and bigotry, or otherwise allow those that would wish to do harm to exploit the very real racial tensions that still exist in America today. My question is specifically, how will Facebook work to monitor the current platforms and Libra to ensure that you're not creating yet another avenue for bad actors and cyber terrorists who are currently using Facebook's platform to upend our national security, to exploit our cultural divisions, to suppress voter turnout, or otherwise interfere in our democratic systems?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'll first address the elections point, and then I'll talk about the approach that we're taking with Libra, if that's okay. So on elections, we were certainly and unfortunately on our back foot in 2016. And while we were looking for certain types of security threats like hacking, and when we found that the Russian government was engaged in that, we identified folks like the FBI and the DNC when we found that. But we weren't at the time looking for these kind of coordinated information operations. Since then, we've now built very sophisticated systems to identify this kind of behavior, that we believe are more sophisticated than what any other company is doing, and frankly, a lot of governments. This Monday, we proactively identified, on our own, a new and sophisticated set of attacks coming from Russia and Iran, which, while that shows that these governments are still trying to engage in this kind of election interference, it also, I hope, will give us some confidence that we can now more proactively identify these threats and nip them in the bud. On Libra, do you want me to address Libra? Or
quickly, because
okay.
I've got another question.
So I think that we're aware over the last few years where we've had a number of challenges that we are now a lot of what we do is too kind of central to the democratic process and to society for us to just kind of go off on our own and come up with what we think the answer is and show up and launch it. That's why with Libra, what we're doing is we wrote a white paper, co-wrote this white paper in order to invite this conversation, because we knew that this is very sensitive. There are a lot of issues that we need to work through, and we wanted to do so in an open way. And
let me stop you there if you don't mind. I want to ask you another question. I'll send it to you in writing too. But with the recent settlement on the employment discrimination charges, the current lawsuit I heard for international discrimination and evidence indicating Facebook and its various algorithms are still intentionally discriminating based on race. So why should members of Congress or regulators or the public trust that Facebook would not intentionally discriminate in its offerings with Libra? How can we trust that?
Well, Congresswoman, on principle, that's not something that we would ever want to do or would be in our interest to do. But this is also why there's regulation. I think part of the challenge right now that internet companies and particularly us face is that there is not sufficient regulation in a number of areas where we operate. I think we need federal privacy legislation. I think we need data portability legislation. I think clearer rules on elections-related content would be helpful too, because it's not clear to me that we want private companies making so many decisions on these important areas by themselves.
So on the algorithm biases on your platform, how have you addressed them?
As part of the settlement that we made with the NFHA and civil rights groups, we've agreed to study this in depth. The first thing that we need to figure out is what the right way to study it is, because right now we actually don't know the race and ethnic background of people in our community, and it's not clear that people want us to track that. So I think we need to figure out how the right way to do this research is, so we can understand if there's any disparate impact and how to mitigate it.
I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Garcia, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here today. When your representative from Facebook, Libra, was here a bit over a month ago, Mr. Marcus, I heard 3 really positive things about Libra. One, that it's a nonprofit organization, that the aims of creating this project included banking the unbanked or the underbanked, 1, and 2, creating a more stable system for transferring money. As an immigrant, I appreciate all of those things. You have said that Libra and Calibra will follow federal laws and regulations. However, you have not been clear on which laws and regulations apply to your project. For example, you told Mr. Perlmutter earlier today that you were not seeking a bank charter. So if you could answer yes or no, should Libra be regulated as a bank?
Congressman, I don't believe so.
Yes or no?
I don't believe so. Libra is a payment.
So that's a no. In addition, questions have been raised whether or not U.S. securities laws apply to a stable coin like Libra. Another yes or no question. Should Libra be regulated by the Securities Exchange Commission?
Congressman, my understanding is the SEC is currently discussing this. We believe that.
Do you think that you ought to be regulated by the SEC, yes or no?
Well, certainly they get to decide whether they believe that
you won't answer the question. Mr.
We don't believe it is a security.
So you're unable to give clear answers about which laws should apply to your project, which is concerning to me given your advertising monopoly and your corporate power. Whenever we have blurred the lines between commerce and banking in this country, we have run into problems. That's why I'm introducing the Keep Big Tech Out of Finance Act today. I don't think that we can trust you. In 2012, the FTC caught you breaking the law, told you not to do it again, and then you did it again. You did not give a deposition to the FTC as part of that investigation. The FTC's Associate Director of Enforcement has said that you testified under oath, that if you had testified under oath, it would have opened up to, quote, a huge amount of litigation outside of FTC. Maybe that helps us understand the $5 billion payment. It is concerning that as part of the FTC settlement, you and other Facebook executives were absolved of personal responsibility for all the wrongdoing during the covered period. Mr. Zuckerberg, you have unilateral control over Facebook with nearly 60% of the voting shares. As other colleagues have mentioned, Facebook acts as a de facto government with you at the helm. You're not accountable even to your shareholders on your board. And throughout the day, we've heard how you evaded accountability even when the government has attempted to hold Facebook accountable for its violations. Facebook's reach and power is now so significant that former UN Ambassador Samantha Power recently pointed out that Facebook is worth more than 137 countries in the United Nations. Mr. Zuckerberg, how much wealth and power is too much for a single private corporation? And how much wealth and power is too much for you?
Well, Congressman, I think you may misunderstand my motive. So I'm certainly not doing this because I'm trying to make more money. I've committed that I'm going to give 99% of the Facebook shares away during my life to philanthropic causes through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative with my wife. So, making money is certainly not my main motive here. I am trying to use the position that I have to do things that I think are going to make the world better and are going to improve people's lives. And I would hope that that's what you would want me to do. I mean, we're in a unique position.
Thank you for your answer. Let me just say this. From all that I have heard in the last month plus coming into this hearing and your testimonies this morning, this afternoon, I think that Facebook has acquired too much power. It has become too big, and we should seriously consider breaking it up. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for sticking with us, and you're coming close to the end, and I had a lot of the questions on my list that others have asked, so I will do follow-up on several of those. And I want to just start picking up on something my colleague from Illinois has asked Mr. Garcia. Do you agree that Libra is a stable coin?
Congresswoman, I think
yes or no?
I think you could characterize it as a
it is a stable coin.
I think so.
Okay, well, we can agree on that. So, following up on Representative Maloney and Foster both, who asked you about anonymous wallets, do you think they should be allowed to exist on the Libra network?
Congresswoman, I think that there are some competing equities here, and I think allowing some amount of that to exist could facilitate the goal of financial inclusion, but I also understand that that increases some risk. So I think
the risks are high, and I think that you were asked that question from one of my colleagues from the other side of the aisle in terms of compliance with anti-money laundering laws, and of course it's a real huge concern. And like Mr. Vice Chairman, I too traveled with the chairman abroad, and we did talk to Germany, who has now said that they will bar you from their country. We talked to Qatar, we talked to Cyprus, and they all shared the same concerns and have suggested that they too may bar you from their countries. I think France has already decided to do that. So you may be right, this may not work. And I'm concerned that I don't hear a firm commitment from you to work on some of these issues, because this is a national security risk. We cannot afford to have terrorists. We cannot afford to have money laundering made easier by the app that you have, or the Libra network, that would make it much easier for them to access. While I think your goal of the unbanked is laudable, I just think that it will not be them that would use it. I agree with my colleague, Ms. Presley. So moving on, so do you think that you will be able, or the association will be able to really work a ratio that's 1-to-1 that will ensure that it will always be stable?
Congresswoman, I think so. I mean, that certainly will be the default if someone buys.
This is not the full faith and credit of the U.S. that we're talking about. We're talking about, you know, a mix in a basket of potentially euros and yens and dollars, and those fluctuate. So the impact is not only to this country, but to many other countries. So do you have any idea how they actually plan to manage that?
Congresswoman, that will be up to the Libra Association to manage. That's not under my control, but that will be regulated.
But Mr. Marcus is under your control.
Well, I'm not sure I'd say that, but he works for me.
He works for you. He works for you, and he chairs the board, does he not? Or he's a member of the board?
Sorry. Can you repeat that?
Well, but he works for you, and then he, in turn, is part of the association, is on the board. So that's a big voice that you have on the board. Even though you're being very careful of calling it an independent association,
yes.
I am suspect of that.
Well, Congresswoman, both things can be true. David runs the Calibra subsidiary for Facebook. He's a member of Facebook's executive team. He is also our delegate and a board member, but only one of the board members of the Independent Libra Association.
Who is the chair of the board of the association? Is it not Mr. Marcus?
Congresswoman, I actually am not sure if the Libra Association board has a chair.
Well, most boards are governed by an executive committee or a chair. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of people in the room having coffee and reading a board agenda.
Congresswoman,
I would be surprised by that. But let's just go ahead and move on. Now, you responded with Ms. Porter. We talked about the number of lawyers. The 60 that was mentioned, are those lobbyists here in D.C. working for you?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Ms. Porter, my colleague, who sat right behind me, she asked you about the lawyers, and she referred to some litigation that you're involved with in terms of the liability issues. Well, then I'll ask you how many lobbyists you have here working for you.
Congresswoman, I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
You don't know how many lawyers you have working for you here in D.C.?
No, Congresswoman, I do not know the breakdown of our exact office here.
Have you ever worked with them to try to get the Federal Reserve to have a digital dollar?
Congresswoman, my understanding is we've certainly talked to the Federal Reserve about a number of things, as they're one of the key stakeholders here.
Well, it seems to me that if you want to help the unbanked and do all these great things, that you would work in an approach that would include the U.S. government. What better partner could you have?
The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Phillips, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Zuckerberg. When you get to me, you're almost at the end, so congratulations. And I'm one who celebrates innovation and innovators, and frankly wish we had more of both here in our Congress. Have you read the book Future Shock, Alvin Toffler's 1970 book about...
Congressman, I've seen it, and I actually have a copy. I have not read it yet.
It's a long one, but I recommend it. Toffler defines future shock as too much change in too short a period of time. And I think it's fair to say that regulation certainly has to play catch up to our tech revolution, and that's in no small part why we're here today. So a number of questions for you. In 2017, Congress released a trove of political ads bought by Facebook, on Facebook, by agents acting on behalf of the Russian government. You've acknowledged that some of those ads were paid for with Russian rubles. Is that correct?
Congressman, that's correct. On 2016, in general, we were on our back foot and behind what we needed to be doing to prevent election interference. And since then, we've built very sophisticated tools and have played a role in defending against foreign election interference in more than 200 elections around the world. So I have some confidence that our systems are in a much better state today on that.
Okay, but at that time, certainly aware that federal law prohibited foreign nationals from spending money to influence the federal election, correct?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
At that time, Facebook was aware that federal law precluded foreign nationals from spending money to influence a United States election.
Congressman, I'm sure our legal team was aware of that, but we didn't at the time vet a government ID of every person buying an ad. Today, one of the measures that we've taken to strengthen our protections against election interference is to require a government ID and for an advertiser to prove their location if they want to run political ads or issue ads across our system.
Okay, which I celebrate, by the way. In fact, we're about to vote on something called the SHIELD Act here in the House. One of my bills is in it, the Firewall Act, which would make sure that foreign money would not be allowed to buy online political ads in our country. So let's move the conversation to Libra. Will Facebook accept Libra as payment for advertisements on its site?
Congressman, I imagine if the project proceeds to that stage, that we would do that. But we haven't developed our full set of policies around where exactly it's going to hook into different parts of our system. The priority right now is to help the Libra Association and make sure that Calibra as a subsidiary can design systems that can comply with all of the U.S. regulations and secure regulatory approval.
Okay, but so you understand what will be kind of a collective concern, which is if you can use Libra to buy ads on Facebook, and you can be anonymous essentially in so doing, the potential challenge that we face then relative to our electoral law.
Congressman, I can assure you that we are not going to allow any weakness to enter into the system that that requires verification of people's government IDs for buying political ads.
Okay. So, and on the subject of verification, as Twitter has verified accounts, has Facebook, I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether Facebook has considered or would even consider verifying its users so that in transactions, especially as we consider what will be a revolutionary initiative in the form of Calibra and Libra, to ensure that accounts are verifiable. And if not, why not?
Congressman, this is an area where I think we are going to do a lot more in the years to come. We started with political ads and political discourse running large pages because that's some of the most sensitive content. But I do think that what you're talking about is going to be a trend in the development of our systems over the coming years, where for anything that people are doing that has sensitivity, we're likely going to increasingly require verification, either by government ID or other things, so we can have a clearer sense of people's authentic identity. There are costs to doing that. Not only does it introduce friction, but I think that there are some kind of equities to balance in terms of whether people broadly are going to want Facebook to be verifying that many people's identities. But I think in general, to balance the safety and security questions, going in that direction for more use cases likely is the right thing to do.
So would it be a competitive advantage or disadvantage for Facebook to ensure all of its users are verified?
Congressman, I doubt we'll ever get to the place where every single person is verified. But I think it could cut both ways strategically. Certainly, if people have verified identities, that creates a culture of authenticity and helps us with security across the platform. On the flip side, that's imposing a lot of constraints and friction on people who are just trying to use a service in the way that they would on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. I thank you, and I yield back. Thanks.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gonzalez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here. And if you're lucky, I may be the last person to ask you a few questions. I know earlier you mentioned Facebook is working harder to protect our 2020 elections. However, we also have a major event in our country, which is the 2020 census that is coming up. And the 2020 census is particularly important to our country. It's important to my district, which has been undercounted historically. We had a Supreme Court case where the court agreed to not allow the question to be asked, the citizenship question to be asked in the 2020 census. My question is, if an ad were to be run on Facebook that was stating if immigrants participate in the census, their information will be turned over to ICE, which is a false statement. Would you allow such information to remain on the platform if offered by a politician or an ordinary citizen?
Congressman, I'm not sure I caught the specific example, but let me answer the principle level.
The question is, if an ad says if immigrants who participate in the census, their information will be shared with ICE, which is a false statement, would you take this ad down, or would you allow it to stay on the platform if an ordinary or a politician posted this?
Okay, so Congressman, where we are right now is we have in place a voter suppression policy, and we're working on finalizing that to extend that to a census.
This isn't voter suppression.
Well. I agree. That's, sorry, I'm trying to answer your question. We're extending the current set of policies that we have around voter suppression to a new census suppression policy too. We recognize that this is important and rises to a level above normal hoaxes or misinformation where we would allow someone to post it, but we would just mark it as potentially marked false by independent fact checkers. For voter suppression information, we actually take it down, and we will do the same thing for census suppression information. We're currently working on finalizing the specifics around what that policy will be, and I would expect that we will roll it out in the coming weeks. So before that, it is somewhat hard for me to answer any specific questions or hypotheticals about whether content would or would not be included in that. But this policy is coming. We take it seriously. I agree that this is extremely important.
Yeah, it's really egregious, and we're really concerned, and we're going to be watching out for this. So are you saying that this is something that you guys are searching for, or would it have to be reported to you that, hey, might be something that's improper, take it down, or do you have a system in place, or are you working on a system in place to not only take it down when it's reported, but actually search and destroy this type of negative and improper and that's information that's inseminated out there?
Congressman, thank you for the question. It's in general for our content moderation, it is a combination of AI and technical systems that can do some proactive scanning, and then a combination of that and human review. What we found is for the state of the art is you want both. You want to use computers and AI to do what computers are best for, which is basically looking at a lot of things and making very quick judgments. And you want to use people for what people can uniquely do, which is making nuanced judgments and often judging linguistic variation between things that are important for some of these policies. So
it just seems
across all these things, we'll generally
with the vast resources that Facebook has and the importance for our national security to have a proper count of the people in our country, that we would expect for you to be more proactive. I think Facebook has been a major success, as you know, and I think its continued success will depend on what happens in 2020, because we'll be watching. We really enjoy it. I enjoy your platform. I think you've done amazing things for this country and around the world, but we really want you to be responsible, and especially when it comes to national politics and national issues like the census. And we think Facebook has a responsibility to do so, and I hope that you can follow through on this. We'll be watching. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I certainly care about this a lot.
Thank you.
Now that we've exhausted all of our members present, I now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes for a closing statement. Mr. McHenry.
Well, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Zuckerberg. Clocking in at just over 6 hours, it's not a brief hearing. We've covered, I think, the full range of topics for the fullness of your corporation. And so, frankly, I'm not sure that we've learned anything new here as policymakers on Capitol Hill. We've covered a lot of topics, but my fear is that we still don't have a deeper understanding of how Libra will work, how it might further financial inclusion, or this question of cross-border movement of value or money, or how it may expand access to financial services for Americans that need it most. We don't have clarity about that. And as I said earlier, I have my own real concerns about Facebook and, quite frankly, many of the big tech companies. And that's why I said that at the beginning of this hearing, you're here to represent not just your company, but well, Silicon Valley and the biggest of technology companies. So we've had an opportunity for our members to express many of what I view as valid concerns about the pitfalls emerging from new technologies, particularly on the privacy front. And you've heard it from both sides of the aisle in terms of privacy and the work that you acknowledge that Facebook needs to continue to do to regain that trust that your users expect. And as well as opportunity for members to express, quite frankly, their anger at the commonalities of the digital age. Some of that fear is rightly directed at Facebook, sure, but not all of it. And again, there are real concerns about the digital age and about big tech. But make no mistake, for those of us here as policymakers, I think we should have a common understanding that innovation is coming. With us here in Washington, D.C., or in the United States, or without us, because there is a very competitive environment we have around the globe with enormous competition. You can just look at a couple of examples dealing with the Chinese repression of free speech that gives us great pause as Americans. And that regime using technology, sophisticated technology, to repress people's freedoms as a disturbing sign of what big technology could do and could bring to bear on unwitting people. So I think it's important that we encourage responsible innovation here in the United States. I think it's important that we create regulatory certainty so that we can have innovation occur here, especially when it comes to digital currencies and new ways of transmitting monies. But I think we need to ensure, as policymakers on both sides of the aisle, that we embrace that next wave of innovation and embrace it in a more fulsome way. And in closing, I'd like to insert for the records, Mr. Chair, a letter dated from just a few days ago from Senator Rounds, the distinguished senator from South Dakota, to Anchorage Trust, expressing concern that innovation in this country is falling behind the rest of the world. I think he outlines in a very solid way that we need to have some regulatory certainty in order to foster this innovation. And so with that, Mr. Zuckerberg, thank you for your testimony, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Without objections, we will include that in the record of today's proceedings. Mr. Zuckerberg, I want to thank you on behalf of the committee for making the time to be here today. I'd like to thank your shareholders. I think your time is incredibly valuable. I don't quite know how many millions of dollars your shareholders had to lose today for you to be able to spend these 6+ hours here with us. But I want to thank you, and I'd like to thank them for you making the effort to be here today. It is a heroic effort. It's been a very long hearing. But as we've commonly heard, with great power comes great responsibility. And as the head of perhaps the largest communications network globally, when you talk about interactions and likes and comments and shares and photos and all the different ways that your platform touches people, that's a tremendous amount of power that also comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. And one of the amazing things about this Congress is that we have 441 members to include our territories, and that brings to the table the perspectives throughout the country, from the great state of North Carolina all the way to the territory of Guam in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And when you have some common themes of concern and hesitation and questions that kind of sound similar across this country, that is a responsibility that you have, given the power that you wield with the awesome enterprise that you run in this country. And so on behalf of the American people, I think it's important that we factor in the concerns of basing this Libra operation in Switzerland outside of the legal ability of the United States to be able to so exercise and so regulate. I think it's important for us to firmly consider that our Our concerns aren't just limited to the United States of America, but our responsibility as the reserve currency of the world to make sure that we're looking out for the overall currency impacts that a third-party currency might so present. And with that, I think that it's very important for us to be able to reflect on those things, not just as a body, but the Libra Association in general, and Facebook and yourself in particular. And with that, I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to our chairwoman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zuckerberg, I'd like to thank you for coming today. When we talked about the possibility of this meeting, I indicated that it may be uncomfortable for you, but I also indicated that I'm sure that you know how and would know how to handle it. So I hope you have learned today just how many concerns and questions members of Congress and the public have, not just with the Libra project. Facebook's diversity failures include an abysmal record of hiring and promoting people of color and women, contracting with diverse suppliers and investing in diverse asset managers. And it appears that the Libra Association's board diversity numbers are following Facebook's example. Facebook has failed to follow our fair housing laws, has inherently discriminatory algorithms. Facebook has repeatedly failed to protect consumer data. Facebook is serving as a vehicle for misinformation campaigns and election interference by malicious state actors, and Facebook is looking to leverage its massive size and economic power to now dominate the global financial system. Regarding the Libra project, we heard concerns ranging from your failure to unequivocally prevent anonymous use, which means sex traffickers and child pornographers and other bad actors can finance their nefarious activities. We also heard repeatedly that this project poses a systemic threat to the U.S. and global economy. And I hope that you've heard these concerns and that you will heed our warnings. And I think there's a lot more discussion to be done about the way that you have framed your concerns about freedom of speech and the fact that politicians are isolated in your concerns about freedom of speech, and that you're opening up the opportunity for not only attacks that not necessarily, I guess, would be tolerated if you were doing some fact-checking, and that suppression. I'm very concerned about suppressing the vote. I'm pleased that you have information that you shared with us about a civil rights audit that is going to be done, because they are going to tell you a lot about how politicians initiate the kind of voter suppression. It is not simply that we're concerned about voter suppression by others other than campaigns. It is not that we're only concerned about governments that are involved in voter suppression. We're concerned about Democrats versus Republicans, Republicans versus Democrats, independents versus Republicans, independents versus Democrats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is serious stuff. And we have been the victims of it for far too many years, exercised in the most creative ways that you could imagine. And so when you talk about, opening up this so-called free speech opportunity, I want you to know that I can envision certain elected officials with billions of dollars who can buy as many ads as they need to buy, and that would take those ads to suppress voters in very creative ways. So with that, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit additional written questions for the witness to the chair, which will be forwarded to Mr. Zuckerberg for his response. I ask you to please respond as promptly as you are able. And without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. This hearing is adjourned.